the Detroit Pistons are evaluating Isaiah Stewart's trade market. So I wanted to know what you thought of this reporting and what your initial thoughts were that the Pistons are evaluating what they could possibly get for Isaiah Stewart.
It's a tough one because I know that I heard a lot about a lot of teams having significant interest in Isaiah Stewart at the deadline. And I know the Pistons were listening. Obviously, they didn't, make a move. And I know now I'm hearing the same thing. I think the Pistons are definitely looking at acquiring a defensive big to, whether it's to take Jalen Duren's starting place temporarily or, like help his development, whatever it is. I know that's one of their priorities this offseason. With that being said, I truly think an Isaiah Stewart trade would be a mistake. And it's a thing of, I understand he's a valuable asset, and I could understand wanting to maximize on valuable assets. However, Isaiah Stewart is someone who has so much switchability on pretty much every aspect of his skill set that I think giving up on someone while he's like 22, 23 is a little too early. And I know his extension's also about to kick in, which I think is about like $16 million going into the cap.
Mm-hmm.
You still have a lot of cap space regardless. And I would rather see them grow with Isaiah Stewart, because if we want to talk about culture, Isaiah Stewart's one of the main culture guys. I mean, I remember talking to a lot of the Cruise players in the beginning of the season, and they would get asked like, who's been a voice that you look to and who's a voice that like, has helped you with the transition. A lot of, especially the two-way guys. I remember at the time it was Malcolm Casalon and like Jared Roden, Buddy Boeheim, et cetera, et cetera. Almost every single player I talked to mentioned Isaiah Stewart as someone that really helped them a lot with the process of getting acclimated in Detroit, getting acclimated, if they played on summer league, like, getting used to like playing with certain guys or knowing what to do. Isaiah Stewart really took the time to get to know and work with these guys. And like, he's going into year 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Year 5. That's not normal for like year 5 guys, right? Like he's 23, I think, and already exuding that type of leadership. I really think that would be a hit to the culture. I know Cade also is a leader, but I think having them both together is a great foundation. If we're talking about foundation, a great foundation for your locker room and for the culture you're trying to build. So I understand, the trade market probably for Isaiah Stewart is pretty good, but if I were Trajan Langdon, I would probably hold on to him.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting conversation, because I think when fans hear evaluating the trade market, they think that Trajan's just going to fire off the first offer he gets, which the way I took this reporting from Jake Fisher was the Pistons are just seeing what the value is. I don't think they're going to trade him because, to your point, vocal leader. I think Jalen Duren said the same thing on the Pistons had a podcast earlier this year. And he said when he first came in, Stewart was very instrumental of helping him get ready for the NBA. Not so much vocally, but on the physical side of the game. Stewart was basically like pushing him down to the ground like every time. I guess. Haven't seen the footage, but that'd be actually really funny to watch. I think fans, when you talk about Stewart, 50-50. I think he's very valuable to what you said. Switchable defender, very good defender, one of the team's best defenders. But he kind of gets put into this box because he's starting right now. And fans, I think their opinions would change if he was off the bench, getting 20, 25 minutes a night versus possibly starting. I think their tune would change if he wasn't in the starting lineup each and every night.
This is actually something I talked about with Koo on Locked On Pistons is like, I think the way some people perceive Isaiah Stewart would change, like you said, if they were to just get him out of the starting four position. Because I think the starting power forward position for Isaiah Stewart really limits the things that he can do on a basketball court. I think he can shoot the ball and he's shown a lot of progression with shooting the ball. That's great. But at least this last season, it really felt like he was pigeonholed into a role where he primarily had to be in the corner and primarily had to be a floor spacer. And I think if you used his skill set to where he can space the floor versus he has to space the floor every single, possession, I think that would really open up a lot of things where you can get Isaiah Stewart to some back to the basket, possessions. You could get Isaiah Stewart on a roll rather than always, fading or popping. I think Isaiah Stewart, even like, and this is just on the offensive end, I think his offensive skill set could really be maximized if you were to just let him be Isaiah Stewart rather than be what felt like they were trying to make him like PJ Tucker, right? And like that's just not his game. He can shoot the ball. That's great. But make it where that's an option, not the only one of many options rather than the only option, So I really would like to see Isaiah Stewart get to play more of his game versus the game that they've kind of molded him into.
Yeah, I talked with Motor City Hoops about this, about the Pistons drafting players and putting them in positions where they're not fully comfortable in. I'm not saying that Stu isn't comfortable playing kind of a stretch four position, but I think to your point, let him play bully ball as a backup center. I think he would thrive like a Naz Reid role, if you will. I think that would be a perfect role for him.
That's exactly like watching Minnesota in the playoffs this year. I was like, man, the Pistons have this right here if they just knew how to use them. And I know during the Casey era, a lot of things Pistons fans would complain about were like playing players out of position or playing players not where their roles were maximized. Like I remember the Sekou years where, looking back, maybe Casey was trying to do him a favor, but they would complain like Sekou's just standing in a corner, right? I kind of felt the same way about Isaiah Stewart, at least offensively this year, where like, yes, his shooting numbers improved and his volume improved. That's fantastic. But why is he only seen as a floor spacer? You're putting out lineups where he is literally the only floor spacing Cade has. And that's not good for Cade. That's not good for the rest of the team. And that's not good for Isaiah Stewart. I know Isaiah Stewart can shoot the ball. Isaiah Stewart knows he can shoot the ball, but that doesn't mean he only shoots the ball. I think you have to get a lot more creative. And I think Isaiah Stewart is a perfect player of like, if you were to just get creative and put him on a winning team, people who say he's not valuable or want him off the team, their opinions would change just like that if he was on a Minnesota or if he was on a Denver, especially Denver actually, or OKC. Any of these teams, Isaiah Stewart's perception is completely flipped, but people only see what's kind of put out there, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, what they watch. Like when we get a new player to trade, I'll use Hamidou Diallo, for example. When Hamidou came to the Pistons, everyone's like, who the hell's that? 2 weeks later, I love Hamidou. Best cutter in the league. Like, if you just watch one team and you're not familiar with their game, you're going to have a different perception. I think the perception that Pistons fans have is Isaiah Stewart's just a low-quality stretch forward, and I don't think that's part of his game. I think he has a game where he can bang down low in the post. I think he has a game where he could put the ball on the ground and get to the basket. I think he's a very underrated passer. They don't really use him in those DHO situations, which I think they should. I think they could do double DHOs with him and Duran. That would just confuse everybody, but that's getting a little bit too creative, probably. I think he's a good player. I think this reporting from Jake Fisher was just kind of Pistons are seeing what they could possibly get, see if New Orleans is still interested, see if Dallas is still interested, see if contending teams are interested, because he's a good player. I know Jack Kelly put out a highlight clip of him just being like the quote-unquote Giannis stopper, which was very well done by Jack. Shout out to him. I think he's valuable, man. I really like him, and I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I think it would be a mistake to trade a guy that's kind of like the culture setter, if you will.
Yeah, I really think. I mean, and I don't mean any of this to take away from Jake's reporting because I know, I know that like that has been explored, right? Like hearing what teams value him as, and I know teams around the league want Isaiah Stewart on their team because they see how switchable he is, how how creative they can get with his offensive skill set. But I think unless it's something you just cannot absolutely under no circumstances turn down, I really think keeping Isaiah Stewart is good both in the short and long term for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. One of the next segments I wanted to get into was free agency. I know it hasn't started yet. I've been asking guests that have been